My brother's girlfriend came downstairs holding my mom's missing prescription bottles and said, "I thought she died from natural causes." The orange pill bottles were clutched in Sienna's hand like evidence at a crime scene, 3 of them, the labels facing me. My mother's name printed in black text that I could read from across the kitchen. Margaret Ann Holloway. The bottles we'd searched the house for 6 times in the 3 months since Mom died. The ones the hospice nurse said must have been thrown out by accident. The ones I'd called the pharmacy about twice, getting lectured both times about proper medication disposal. And here was my brother's girlfriend of 8 months, standing at the bottom of our childhood staircase in yoga pants and one of Liam's oversized shirts, holding them like they were groceries she'd just brought in from the car. I'd been loading the dishwasher at my mother's house, the house where I'd grown up, the house that now sat empty except for weekends when Liam and I came to sort through decades of accumulated belongings. It was a Saturday morning in late September, and I'd driven the 40 minutes from my apartment in the city to continue the endless task of deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to throw away. Liam had texted saying he and Sienna were coming too, that they'd help with the attic. I'd been relieved to have the company, to not spend another weekend alone with Mom's things and the weight of her absence pressing down on every room. The dishwasher was running, that familiar hum filling the kitchen, when I heard Sienna's footsteps on the stairs. I'd turned, ready to ask if she wanted coffee, and that's when I saw the bottles. "Where did you find those?" I asked, my voice coming out steady, even though my heart had started doing something strange in my chest. A weird, stuttering rhythm that made my hands go cold. Sienna's face was pale, her eyes wide like she'd just realized she'd made a terrible mistake. She was 26, 3 years younger than Liam, with the kind of practiced beauty that came from spending serious money on hair, nails, skincare. She worked as a pharmaceutical sales rep, made good money, drove a Lexus that was always spotless. She'd been sweet to Mom during those last few months, bringing flowers, sitting with her, offering to help with medications when the hospice nurse wasn't around. I'd liked her, trusted her. "They were in the guest room closet," Sienna said, her voice shaking slightly. "Behind some boxes. I was looking for extra hangers, and I knocked over a shoebox, and these fell out." She set them on the kitchen counter with a soft plastic rattle, then stepped back like the bottles might explode. "I thought she died from natural causes. The death certificate said heart failure. Why would her prescriptions be hidden in a closet?" The question hung in the air between us, and I realized she was asking because she genuinely didn't know, or because she was very good at pretending not to know. I picked up the first bottle. Digoxin, 0.25 milligrams, prescribed 3 months before Mom died. The safety seal was broken, but the bottle felt too full. I twisted the cap open and counted. 30 pills, a full month's supply, untouched. My mother had died of heart failure on June 15th, 3 months and 8 days ago. She'd been 62, too young, but she'd had a bad heart for years. Multiple hospitalizations, stents, medications that filled an entire kitchen drawer. The hospice team had been coming for the final 6 weeks, managing her pain, making her comfortable. They'd told us it could be days or weeks, that her heart was just too weak to keep going. When she died, it had been peaceful. She'd gone to sleep one night and simply didn't wake up. The hospice nurse had been kind, professional, explaining that this was common with end-stage heart failure. The body just gave out. I'd held Mom's hand while the nurse checked for a pulse, confirmed there was none, made the necessary calls. Liam had been there too, crying harder than I'd ever seen him cry, and Sienna had stood in the corner of the room with her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. We'd buried Mom 4 days later at Oakwood Cemetery under an oak tree she'd picked out herself 2 years earlier when she knew her heart was failing. The service had been small, just family and a few of her closest friends. The death certificate listed the cause as cardiac arrest due to chronic heart disease. Natural causes, the kind of death you expect when someone has been sick for a long time. I'd grieved, was still grieving, but there had been no questions, no suspicions, no reason to think anything except that my mother's tired heart had finally stopped beating. Until now. Until Sienna came downstairs with bottles that should have been in Mom's medication organizer or thrown away by the hospice team, bottles that had no business being hidden in a guest room closet. I picked up the second bottle. Warfarin, blood thinner, same story. Full bottle, unused, dated from May. The third was furosemide, a diuretic for fluid retention, also full. My hands started shaking badly enough that I had to set the bottles down before I dropped them. "Where's Liam?" I asked, and my voice sounded wrong, too high, too tight. Sienna pointed toward the ceiling. "Attic. He's going through boxes of old photos." I nodded slowly, my brain trying to process what I was looking at. 3 full bottles of cardiac medications that Mom needed to stay alive, hidden in a closet, while she died of heart failure. The math was simple and horrible. If she wasn't taking these medications, her heart would fail. Fast. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and took pictures of each bottle from multiple angles, making sure the labels were clear, the dates visible, the pill counts obvious. Sienna watched me do this without saying anything, her face getting paler by the second. "Don't tell Liam yet," I said, surprising myself with the words. "I need to figure out what this means first." She nodded quickly, too quickly, like she was relieved I wasn't making a scene. Okay, yeah, I'll just go help him in the attic. She practically ran out of the kitchen, her footsteps pounding up the stairs fast enough that I heard Liam call out, asking if she was okay. I stood there alone with the medication bottles and the dishwasher humming and my mother's presence everywhere in this kitchen where she'd made thousands of meals, and I knew, deep in my gut where truth lives before your brain catches up, I knew something was very, very wrong. The hospice records were in a file box in Mom's home office, which is what we'd always called the converted sunroom at the back of the house. I found the medication log that Nurse Dorothy Franklin had kept during those final 6 weeks, a spiral notebook with dates and times and dosages, all written in her neat, looping handwriting. I flipped through the pages with my phone in my other hand, taking pictures of everything. June 10th, 5 days before Mom died. Patient refusing medications today, states she feels sick to stomach. June 12th. Daughter Sienna administered evening medications. Patient took without difficulty. Daughter. Dorothy had called Sienna daughter, an easy mistake since Sienna was there so often, helping so much, being so supportive. I kept reading, going backward through May. Multiple entries where Sienna had administered medications. Multiple days where Mom had refused them, felt too sick, couldn't keep them down. But the pattern was wrong. Before Sienna started coming around in early April, Mom had been taking her medications regularly, according to Dorothy's notes. Then Sienna appeared, offering to help, and suddenly Mom was sick all the time, refusing pills, and Sienna was the one managing the medication schedule. I took pictures of every page, my hands steadier now that I had something to do, a task to focus on instead of the screaming in my head. The attic stairs creaked as footsteps descended, and I shoved the notebook into the file box just as Liam appeared in the doorway of the office. He was 31, 2 years older than me, with our father's build and our mother's eyes. Dad had died when we were kids, sudden aneurysm, and after that, it had been just the three of us. Liam had always been the responsible one, the one who called Mom every day, visited every week, handled her medical appointments when she got too sick to drive herself. I'd helped when I could, but I worked long hours as a civil engineer, traveled for projects, used my job as an excuse to not be as present as I should have been. Guilt was a constant companion these past 3 months. Sienna said you found Mom's medications, Liam said, his voice careful. He had that look on his face, the one he got when he was trying to manage a situation, keep everyone calm. That's weird, right? Why would they be in the closet? I showed him the bottles lined up on the desk. He picked up the digoxin, examined it, frowned. These are full. She should have been taking these. His voice trailed off as the same horrible math I'd done started calculating in his head. I watched his face change, watched the confusion shift to something that looked like fear, or maybe denial. Maybe Dorothy was giving her different prescriptions? Maybe these were old ones she didn't need anymore? They're dated from May, I said quietly. And Dorothy's notes say Sienna was administering medications in June, right up until Mom died. Liam's jaw tightened. He set the bottle down carefully, precisely, like he was handling something explosive. What are you saying? His voice had gone cold, defensive. I recognized that tone from when we were kids, when someone would criticize him or question his judgment. Liam didn't like being wrong, didn't like being challenged. I'm saying I have questions, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I'm saying we should probably talk to Dorothy, maybe show these to Mom's cardiologist, make sure we understand what happened. You think Sienna did something? It wasn't a question. Liam was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something hard and angry. You think my girlfriend, who loved Mom, who was here helping every single day while you were off working on your projects, you think she hurt her? The accusation in his voice made me take a step back. I didn't say that. I said I have questions. Don't you have questions, Liam? 3 full bottles of heart medication hidden in a closet while Mom died of heart failure? That doesn't strike you as strange? He picked up all 3 bottles, held them against his chest like he was protecting them. I'm taking these. We'll figure it out. But I'm not letting you go on some paranoid witch hunt against Sienna because you feel guilty for not being here more. The words hit like a physical blow, and I felt my face get hot. That's not what this is. But maybe it was, at least partly. Maybe I was looking for someone to blame because blaming myself was too hard. Liam walked out of the office, the bottles clutched in his hands, and I heard him call for Sienna. They left 10 minutes later without saying goodbye, and I stood at the front window watching Liam's Ford truck pull out of the driveway with Sienna in the passenger seat, her face turned away from the house. I pulled out my phone and looked at the pictures I'd taken. The bottles, the medication log, page after page of documentation that something wasn't right about how my mother died. I called Dorothy Franklin that afternoon. I had her number in my phone from all the times I'd coordinated Mom's care during those last weeks. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice warm and professional. This is Dorothy. I explained who I was, asked if we could meet to discuss Mom's final weeks, said I had some questions about the medication management. There was a pause, then she said, Of course, honey. I've been thinking about your mom a lot. She was such a sweet lady. How about Monday morning? I have a gap between patients around 10. I agreed, wrote down the address of the hospice office, thanked her, and hung up. Then I sat in Mom's living room surrounded by her things and tried to figure out what I was supposed to do with what I'd found. The weekend passed in a blur of obsessive research. I Googled cardiac medication interactions, read about digoxin toxicity, learned that withholding blood thinners could cause clots that would lead to heart failure. I read about pharmaceutical sales reps and their access to medications, about how easy it would be for someone with medical knowledge to manipulate prescriptions. I went down rabbit holes about murder disguised as natural death, about family members who killed for inheritance, about partners who eliminated obstacles to get what they wanted. By Sunday night, I had a notebook full of notes and a head full of scenarios that ranged from innocent explanation to premeditated murder, and I had no idea which one was true. Liam called Sunday evening while I was sitting at my apartment trying to focus on work emails. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "Sienna is really upset. She's crying, thinks you're accusing her of killing Mom." His voice was tight with anger. "I told her that's crazy, that you're just confused and grieving, but she wants to know what you're going to do with those pictures you took." My stomach dropped. How did she know I took pictures? Silence on the line. Then, "She saw you. She said she didn't want to make a big deal about it at the time, but now she's scared you're going to do something with them." "I'm meeting with Dorothy Franklin tomorrow," I said. "I'm going to show her the bottles and ask her some questions, that's all." Liam's breath came out in a sharp exhale. "You can't do that. You can't drag Sienna through this because you have some theory. She didn't do anything wrong. She helped Mom. She was there every single day being supportive while you were at work pretending Mom wasn't dying." The guilt hit again, harder this time. "I was there as much as I could be." My voice sounded defensive even to my own ears. "Not as much as Sienna," Liam shot back. "She rearranged her whole work schedule to be there. She loved Mom. And you're going to repay that by accusing her of murder?" "I'm not accusing anyone of anything," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "I'm asking questions about medication that should have been used but wasn't. If there's an innocent explanation, great. But I can't just pretend I didn't find those bottles, Liam. I can't just ignore this." He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, gone softer, pleading. "Daniel, please, don't do this. Don't destroy my relationship. Don't destroy Sienna's reputation. Don't tear apart our family over some bottles of pills. Mom's gone. She's not coming back. What difference does it make now how she died?" The question hung between us, and I realized we were at a crossroads. I could let this go, preserve my relationship with my brother, avoid the ugliness of investigation and accusation, or I could keep pulling the thread and see where it led, even if it unraveled everything. "It makes a difference to me," I said quietly. "I'm sorry, Liam. I have to know." He hung up without saying goodbye, and I sat there with my phone in my hand, wondering if I'd just lost my only sibling over bottles of pills that might mean nothing. But I couldn't shake the image of Sienna's face when she'd come down those stairs, the shock in her eyes, the immediate question about natural causes, like she'd been surprised, like she'd thought those bottles were supposed to be gone. Dorothy Franklin's office was in a medical building on the north side of town, all beige walls and industrial carpet and the smell of antiseptic. She met me in a small conference room with a window overlooking the parking lot, her gray hair pulled back in the same neat bun she'd worn when caring for Mom. She was in her late 50s, had been a hospice nurse for 23 years, and had kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. "Daniel," she said, standing to shake my hand. "How are you holding up, honey?" I sat down across from her, pulled out my phone, and showed her the pictures of the medication bottles. Her smile faded as she looked at the screen, zooming in to read the labels. "Where did you find these?" she asked, her voice going professional. I explained about Sienna finding them in the guest room closet, about the dates and the full bottles. Dorothy was quiet for a long time, scrolling through the pictures, her expression getting more serious with each one. "This is concerning," she finally said. "Your mother needed these medications to keep her heart stable. If she wasn't taking them..." She trailed off, pulled out a tablet from her bag, opened a file. "Let me show you something." She turned the screen toward me, showing Mom's medication schedule. I documented every dose, every refusal, every interaction. "See here, starting in late April, your mother started refusing medications more frequently. She'd complain of nausea, dizziness, confusion. I attributed it to her declining condition." "But," I prompted, hearing the hesitation in her voice. Dorothy zoomed in on specific entries. "But it was always on days when Sienna was there helping. I remember thinking it was odd because Sienna was so good with her, so patient and gentle. Your mother seemed more comfortable when Sienna administered the medications." She looked up at me, and I saw something in her eyes that looked like guilt. I should have questioned it more, should have wondered why Margaret was refusing medications on my watch but taking them for Sienna. But I was managing 6 other patients, and honestly, I was just grateful someone was there to help. She closed the file, set the tablet down. "You think Sienna was giving her something else? Or not giving her the medications at all?" "I don't know what to think," I said honestly. "I just know that 3 full bottles of critical medications were hidden in a closet, and my mother died of heart failure, and my brother's girlfriend who works in pharmaceutical sales was the one administering those medications." Dorothy nodded slowly, her face grave. "I need to report this. I have to contact the hospice medical director, and probably the county medical examiner, If there's any possibility that your mother's death was not natural, there needs to be an investigation. My hands started shaking again. Hearing someone else say it, someone with medical credentials and years of experience, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. What happens now? I asked. Dorothy pulled out a business card, wrote a name and number on the back. This is Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the medical examiner for the county. I'm going to call her office this afternoon, but you should too. Explain what you found, show her the pictures. She'll determine if there's enough evidence to warrant an autopsy. My stomach turned over. An autopsy? We buried her 3 months ago. Dorothy's expression was sympathetic but firm. I know, honey. I'm sorry. But if you want answers, that's the only way to get them. They'll need to exhume the body, run toxicology tests, see what was actually in her system when she died. It's not pleasant, but it's necessary. I left Dorothy's office with Dr. Tanaka's contact information and a sick feeling in my gut that wouldn't go away. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes before I could make myself drive, and even then, I didn't go back to work like I should have. Instead, I drove to Oakwood Cemetery, parked near the oak tree where we'd buried Mom, and sat on the grass by her headstone. Margaret Ann Holloway, beloved mother, 1961 to 2023. The grass had grown over the grave, fresh and green, hiding the scar of disturbed earth. I thought about what Dorothy had said. Exhumation. Autopsy. Cutting into my mother's body to find out if someone had killed her. The thought made me want to vomit. My phone rang. Liam. I let it go to voicemail. He called again immediately. Then Sienna called from her number. I turned the phone off and sat by Mom's grave until the groundskeeper came by and told me they were closing the cemetery for the evening. I drove home as the sun was setting, orange and red bleeding across the sky, and I thought about how 3 months ago I'd thought my life was straightforward. Sad, because Mom was gone, but straightforward. Now I was looking at my brother's girlfriend and seeing a potential murderer, and I didn't know how to reconcile those two images. The Sienna who'd brought flowers and sat with Mom and cried at her funeral. The Sienna who might have been systematically withholding life-saving medications to kill her. I called Dr. Tanaka's office first thing Monday morning. The receptionist put me through to her voicemail, and I left a message explaining who I was, what I'd found, asking for a callback. She returned my call 3 hours later while I was in a project meeting, and I stepped out into the hallway to talk. Doctor. Yuki Tanaka had a calm, measured voice that reminded me of my college professors, clinical and precise. I spoke with Dorothy Franklin this morning, she said. She sent me her complete notes from your mother's case, including the medication log. I've also reviewed the death certificate. Based on what you've described and the documentation available, I believe there's sufficient cause to request an exhumation and full autopsy. The words hung in the air, official and terrifying. What's the process? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Tanaka explained that she'd file a petition with the court, that I'd need to provide a formal statement and all the evidence I'd collected. If the judge approved, which she thought was likely given the circumstances, the exhumation would be scheduled within 2 to 3 weeks. The autopsy would focus on toxicology, looking for evidence of medication levels, possible poisoning, anything that might explain why a woman on multiple cardiac medications died of heart failure while having full, unused bottles of those same medications hidden in her home. This is a criminal investigation now, Dr. Tanaka said gently. I'll need to involve the county sheriff's department. They'll assign a detective to the case. I met with Detective Raymond Kovac on a Wednesday afternoon at the sheriff's department, a squat brick building that smelled like coffee and old paperwork. Kovac was in his mid-50s, heavy-set, with gray hair, buzzed short and tired eyes that had seen too much. He'd been with the department for 28 years, the last 12 in the Criminal Investigations Division. He listened while I walked through everything, taking notes in a small leather notebook, occasionally asking clarifying questions. I showed him the pictures on my phone, explained about Sienna's job in pharmaceutical sales, detailed the timeline of Mom's decline coinciding with Sienna's increased involvement. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied me. Your brother know you're here? He asked. I shook my head. He thinks I'm on a paranoid witch hunt. He's protecting Sienna. Kovac nodded like he'd heard this story before. That's going to complicate things. If we pursue this and it turns out Sienna did something, your brother's going to be in the middle. He might be complicit, might be a victim, might be completely innocent. We won't know until we investigate. He flipped through his notes. I'll need to interview everyone who had contact with your mother in the months before she died. The hospice staff, her doctors, friends, family. I'll need access to her medical records, prescription history, financial documents, and I'll need to talk to Sienna and your brother, probably more than once. They're going to lawyer up, I said. Kovac smiled without humor. That's their right. Doesn't mean they did anything wrong, just means they're smart. In the meantime, I need you to do something for me. He pulled out a business card, handed it across the desk. This is Barbara Whitfield, a lawyer who specializes in estate law and wrongful death cases. Give her a call. If this turns out to be a homicide, you're going to need legal representation, and she's the best. I took the card, my fingers numb. Homicide. The word made everything real in a way it hadn't been before. You think Sienna killed my mother? I said quietly. It wasn't a question. Kovac chose his words carefully. I think there are enough red flags here to warrant a thorough investigation. I think a woman died under circumstances that may not have been natural, and I think someone with medical knowledge and access had motive and opportunity. But thinking and proving are two different things. Right now, I'm gathering evidence. We'll see where it leads. He stood up, extended his hand. I'll be in touch once the exhumation is approved. In the meantime, don't confront Sienna or your brother about any of this. Don't discuss the investigation with anyone except your lawyer. Let me do my job, and we'll get to the truth. The exhumation order came through 8 days later. I got a call from Dr. Tanaka on a Friday morning explaining that the judge had reviewed the evidence and approved the petition. The exhumation was scheduled for the following Monday at 6 a.m. before the cemetery opened to the public. I could be present if I wanted, but she warned me it wouldn't be pleasant. I told her I'd be there. I needed to see it through, needed to know that we were actually doing this. That night, Liam showed up at my apartment unannounced, pounding on the door until I opened it. He pushed past me into the living room, his face red with fury. "You filed for an exhumation?" he shouted. "You're digging up Mom's body? What the hell is wrong with you?" I closed the door, kept my voice calm, even though my heart was racing. "I found evidence that suggests Mom's death wasn't natural. I had to report it." Liam spun on me, and for a second I thought he might actually take a swing. "Evidence? You found some bottles of pills and decided that means Sienna murdered our mother? Do you hear yourself? You sound insane." His voice cracked on the last word. "The detective thinks there's enough evidence to investigate," I said. "The medical examiner thinks there's enough evidence to exhume. I'm not doing this on my own, Liam. Professionals are involved now." "Because you got them involved," he was shouting again. "You started this whole thing, and now Sienna's being questioned like a criminal, and I'm being questioned like I'm some kind of accomplice. And our mother's grave is going to be dug up, because you can't accept that she died." He took a step toward me, close enough that I could smell the beer on his breath. "She had a bad heart, Daniel. She was dying. The doctor said it could happen any time. There's no conspiracy here. There's just you trying to find someone to blame because you feel guilty." The words hit their target, sharp and precise. "Maybe," I admitted. "Maybe I do feel guilty. But that doesn't change the fact that 3 bottles of critical medications were hidden in a closet. That doesn't change Dorothy's notes about Mom refusing medications on specific days. That doesn't change the pattern." Liam's face shifted, and suddenly he looked exhausted. "Sienna said you'd twist everything. She said you'd make her look bad no matter what she did." He sank onto my couch, put his head in his hands. "She loved Mom. She was there every day. She gave up weekends, rearranged her work schedule, sat with her when she was scared and in pain. And this is how you repay that?" I sat down in the chair across from him, suddenly feeling tired too. "Liam, I know you care about Sienna. I know you think she's good for you. But you need to consider the possibility that you don't know her as well as you think you do. People can hide things. People can lie." "Like you're lying now?" he shot back. "Making up this whole murder theory to ease your conscience?" I pulled out my phone, showed him the pictures of the medication bottles for what felt like the 100th time. "I'm not making anything up. This is real. These bottles are real. The questions are real. And if Sienna has nothing to hide, the investigation will prove that." Liam looked at the pictures for a long time, his expression unreadable. Then he stood up. "She's already hired a lawyer. Told me not to talk to you without him present. I thought she was overreacting, but now I see she was right. You're trying to destroy her, and you're willing to destroy our family to do it." He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the knob. "Mom's exhumation is on Monday. I'll be there to make sure you don't desecrate her memory any more than you already have." He left without waiting for a response, and I sat alone in my apartment listening to the sound of his truck pulling away, wondering if I'd just lost my brother forever over bottles of pills that might prove nothing. But I couldn't stop now. I'd already set things in motion, and the only way out was through. Monday morning at 5:45 a.m., I stood in Oakwood Cemetery watching a small excavator dig up my mother's grave. The sky was still dark, the air cold with early autumn chill. Dr. Tanaka was there with a team from the medical examiner's office, all of them in professional clothing with official badges. Detective Kovac was there too, standing apart from everyone else, observing. And Liam was there, on the other side of the grave, staring at me with an expression of pure hatred. Sienna wasn't with him. Her lawyer had advised her to stay away, according to Kovac. The process took 2 hours. The excavator removed the dirt carefully, and then cemetery workers in protective gear lifted the casket from the ground. It looked smaller than I remembered, weathered by 3 months underground. Dr. Tanaka's team loaded it into a white van, secured it, and drove away to the medical examiner's facility. Just like that, my mother's body was gone again, taken away for the second time. Liam left without speaking to me, and I stood there watching the cemetery workers fill in the hole, replacing the dirt, smoothing it over. Detective Kovac walked over, stood beside me. "Results will take about 2 weeks," he said quietly. "Toxicology is thorough but slow. In the meantime, I'm continuing the investigation. I've requested your mother's complete medical records from her cardiologist, pulled her prescription history from every pharmacy in the county, and scheduled interviews with everyone on the hospice team. He paused. I also got a warrant for Sienna's work records. I want to see what medications she had access to, what she was selling, whether anything correlates with your mother's symptoms. I nodded, not trusting my voice. You doing okay? Kovac asked, and the kindness in his tone almost broke me. I just had my mother's body dug up because I think my brother's girlfriend killed her, I said. I'm not sure okay is possible right now. Kovac nodded. Fair enough. Go home. Get some rest. I'll call you when I have updates. I drove back to my apartment and called in sick to work, spent the rest of the day in bed staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from Liam, each one angrier than the last. You're sick. Mom would be ashamed of you. I hope you can live with what you've done. I turned the phone off and tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw the excavator and the casket and the look on Liam's face. Barbara Whitfield called me 3 days later. She'd been briefed by Detective Kovac and wanted to meet. Her office was downtown in a modern building with glass walls and expensive art. She was in her early 60s, sharp-eyed and professional, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. We sat in her conference room, and she laid out the situation with clinical precision. If the autopsy shows evidence of poisoning or medication manipulation, the state will likely file criminal charges against Sienna. You, as the sole surviving child and beneficiary of your mother's estate, will have standing to file a civil wrongful death suit. The criminal case will be harder to prove, requiring evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. The civil case has a lower burden of proof, preponderance of evidence. What about Liam? I asked. Is he in trouble? Barbara consulted her notes. That depends on what Detective Kovac finds. If Liam knew what Sienna was doing and didn't stop it, he could be charged as an accessory. If he was manipulated or genuinely didn't know, he's a witness and potentially a victim. Right now, it's unclear. She looked at me seriously. You need to prepare yourself for the possibility that this destroys your relationship with your brother permanently. Even if Sienna is convicted, even if everything you suspect is proven true, Liam may never forgive you for exposing it. The toxicology results came back on a Wednesday, 14 days after the exhumation. Dr. Tanaka called me herself to deliver the news. We found elevated levels of digoxin in your mother's tissue samples, but not from the prescription she was supposed to be taking. The levels were inconsistent, suggesting irregular dosing. We also found evidence of warfarin, but again, at levels that suggest it was being withheld periodically, allowing clots to form. And we found traces of a medication called verapamil, a calcium channel blocker that your mother was not prescribed. When combined with her existing heart condition and the irregular dosing of her other medications, the verapamil would have been extremely dangerous, potentially fatal. My hands were shaking so hard I had to put the phone on speaker. Someone was poisoning her. Doctor. Tanaka's voice was gentle but firm. Someone was manipulating her medications in a way that would cause heart failure while appearing natural. The verapamil is the smoking gun. It's commonly used in pharmaceutical sales samples, easy to access if you work in the industry. The irregular dosing of her prescribed medications created a pattern of symptoms that would mask the effects of the verapamil. It was sophisticated and deliberate. She paused. I've forwarded my report to Detective Kovac and the district attorney. This is now officially a homicide investigation. Detective Kovac called an hour later. We're bringing Sienna in for questioning this afternoon. I wanted to give you a heads up before it hits the news. My stomach lurched. What about Liam? Kovac sighed. We'll be questioning him too, separately. Right now, he's not a suspect, but we need to establish what he knew and when he knew it. I've got a warrant for Sienna's apartment and her work computer. We're looking for evidence that she accessed verapamil samples, communications about your mother, anything that establishes intent. He paused. This is going to get ugly, Daniel. Media will pick it up, your brother's going to be in the middle, and it's going to take months, if not years, to get through the legal process. You ready for that? I don't have a choice, I said. If she killed my mother, she needs to face consequences. Kovac's voice softened. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. It took guts to pursue this when everyone was telling you to let it go. Your mother deserves justice, and you're making sure she gets it. After he hung up, I sat in my apartment and waited for the news to break. It didn't take long. By evening, the local news was running the story. Pharmaceutical sales representative arrested in suspicious death investigation. Authorities exhume body of 62-year-old woman, find evidence of medication poisoning. They didn't name Sienna yet, pending formal charges, but everyone who knew our family would figure it out quickly enough. Liam called at 8:30 p.m., his voice ragged. They arrested her. They're charging her with first-degree murder. They think she planned it, Daniel. They think she deliberately killed Mom. He was crying now, harsh sobs that hurt to hear. I don't understand. Why would she do that? What did she have to gain? I didn't have an answer for him, but Detective Kovac did. He called the next morning with an update. We found the motive. Sienna had been researching your mother's estate, knew she owned the house outright, had a life insurance policy worth $150,000. She'd been dating your brother for 8 months, was talking about marriage. If she married Liam and your mother was already dead, he'd inherit everything, and by extension, so would she. But Mom wasn't even that sick 8 months ago, I said, confused. Kovac's voice went hard. Exactly. That's when Sienna started coming around, started helping with medications. That's when your mother's condition started deteriorating rapidly. We pulled Sienna's work records. She had access to verapamil samples, ostensibly for giving to doctors to prescribe to patients. We found texts on her phone to a friend saying she'd met a guy with family money and she was going to play the long game. The friend texted back asking what that meant, and Sienna responded with a winking emoji and, "You'll see." The preliminary hearing was set for 6 weeks later. I sat in the courtroom with Barbara Whitfield on one side and Dorothy Franklin on the other. Across the aisle, Sienna sat with her defense attorney, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, her designer clothes replaced with a simple black dress. Liam wasn't there. He'd stopped taking my calls, had blocked me on everything. The prosecutor, a woman named Jennifer Gaines with 20 years of experience, laid out the evidence methodically: the hidden medication bottles, the hospice notes showing a pattern of symptoms correlating with Sienna's presence, the toxicology report showing irregular medication levels and the presence of verapamil, the work records showing Sienna's access to the drug, the texts revealing motive. Sienna's lawyer tried to argue that the evidence was circumstantial, that correlation didn't equal causation, that verapamil could have come from anywhere. But the judge wasn't buying it. He ruled there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial, set the date for 4 months out, and denied Sienna's request for bail. The defendant is charged with premeditated murder using her medical knowledge and access to pharmaceuticals to kill a vulnerable victim over a period of months. She presents a significant flight risk and a danger to the community. Bail is denied. Sienna started crying. Her lawyer put his hand on her shoulder, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a hollow emptiness where my family used to be. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified on day 5, walking through the discovery of the medication bottles, the decision to investigate, the evidence I'd collected. Sienna's lawyer cross-examined me aggressively, trying to paint me as a bitter, guilt-ridden son, looking for someone to blame for his mother's death. "Isn't it true you barely visited your mother in her final months?" he asked. "Isn't it true you felt guilty for not being there, and this entire prosecution is about easing that guilt?" I looked him in the eye and said, "My guilt is irrelevant. The evidence is what matters, and the evidence shows your client systematically poisoned my mother for financial gain." Dorothy Franklin testified on day 8, describing the pattern of symptoms, the medication log, her growing concerns that she'd ignored. She cried on the stand, apologized to me directly for not seeing what was happening. "I should have questioned it," she said. "I should have protected Margaret. I failed her, and I'll live with that forever." Doctor. Tanaka testified on day 9, explaining the toxicology results in detail, walking the jury through how the irregular medication dosing combined with the verapamil would cause the exact symptoms Mom had experienced. "This was not natural heart failure," she said firmly. "This was induced heart failure caused by deliberate medication manipulation." The most damaging testimony came on day 12, when the prosecution called Sienna's former co-worker, a woman named Rita Hayes, who'd worked with her for 3 years. Rita testified that Sienna had talked frequently about wanting to marry rich, about finding a man with money or assets. She said she was tired of working so hard for her income, Rita said. She wanted to find an easier way. When she started dating Liam, she told me his mother owned property and had life insurance. She said it like it was a bonus, like she'd won a prize. Rita's voice shook. I thought she was joking. I never thought she'd actually do something to speed up an inheritance. Liam testified on day 15 for the defense. He looked terrible, like he'd aged 10 years in the 6 months since Mom died. He testified that Sienna had been kind to Mom, attentive, loving, that she'd never said anything about inheritance or money, that he'd never suspected anything was wrong. On cross-examination, the prosecutor asked him directly, "Did you know your girlfriend was withholding your mother's medications?" Liam's voice broke. "No. I swear to God I didn't know. If I'd known, I would have stopped her. I would have called the police myself." I believed him. My brother had many faults, but he'd loved our mother. He'd been manipulated, used, caught in Sienna's plan without realizing it. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. I sat in the courthouse cafeteria with Barbara, drinking bad coffee and trying not to think about what would happen if they came back with not guilty. But when the bailiff called us back into the courtroom, I knew from the jury's faces. They wouldn't look at Sienna. That meant conviction. The foreman stood and read the verdict. On the charge of first-degree murder, we find the defendant guilty. Sienna collapsed, her lawyer caught her, and the judge called for order. The sentencing hearing was set for 3 weeks out, and Sienna was remanded to custody. As they led her out in handcuffs, she looked directly at me for the first time since the trial started. Her face was empty of emotion, and I wondered if I'd ever really known who she was. Sentencing came on a cold morning in early March, 9 months after Mom had died. The judge gave Sienna life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. "You betrayed the trust of a dying woman and her family," he said. "You used your medical knowledge to kill someone who welcomed you into her home, who cared for you. The premeditation, the sophistication of your crime, and your complete lack of remorse warrant the maximum sentence allowed by law. Sienna was 46. She'd be 71 before she could even apply for parole. I watched the bailiffs lead her away and felt the weight of 9 months lift slightly from my shoulders. Liam was waiting outside the courthouse when I emerged. He looked at me across the plaza, and for a moment I thought he might walk away. But then he crossed the distance between us and stopped a few feet away. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for not believing you, for defending her, for saying all those things to you." His voice cracked. "I loved her, Daniel. I really thought she loved me too. I thought she loved Mom." Tears were streaming down his face now. "I brought her into our house. I let her get close to Mom. This is my fault." I stepped forward and pulled my brother into a hug, and he collapsed against me, sobbing. "It's not your fault," I said firmly. "You didn't know. You couldn't have known. She fooled everyone, Liam. The hospice staff, the doctors, me. She was good at hiding what she was." We stood there in the cold, two brothers who'd lost their mother twice, once to death and once to the truth about that death, and I felt something shift between us. The anger and betrayal and accusations faded, and what was left was grief. Pure, uncomplicated grief for the woman we'd both loved and lost. 6 months later, I stood at Mom's grave with fresh flowers. The grass had grown back over the disturbed earth from the exhumation, and you couldn't tell anymore that it had been dug up. The headstone had been cleaned, and someone had added a small bronze plaque beneath the dates. "Justice served, rest in peace." Liam had done that, he'd told me, his way of apologizing to Mom for bringing Sienna into her life. We visited the grave together now, every month, trying to rebuild the relationship that Sienna's crime had fractured. It was slow work, and some days were harder than others, but we were trying. The house sold 3 months after the trial ended. Neither of us could stand to be in it anymore, knowing what had happened there. We split the proceeds evenly, put Mom's belongings in storage, and tried to move forward. I started therapy with a woman named Dr. Patricia Flynn, who specialized in trauma and complicated grief. She helped me understand that pursuing the investigation didn't make me vengeful or paranoid. It made me someone who refused to accept injustice. "Your mother needed an advocate," Dr. Flynn said during one session. "You became that advocate when no one else would. That's something to be proud of." I think about Sienna sometimes, sitting in prison, and I wonder if she regrets what she did. If she thinks about my mother, about the life she took for money that she'll never get to spend. I wonder if she ever actually cared about Liam, or if he was just a means to an end from the very beginning. Mostly, though, I think about Mom, about the last months of her life, dealing with symptoms she didn't understand, trusting someone who was actively killing her. The thought makes me sick, but it also makes me grateful that I found those bottles, that I asked the questions, that I didn't let it go. Justice doesn't bring people back. It doesn't undo the harm or erase the pain, but it matters. It mattered to me, to Liam, to everyone who loved Mom. And it matters that Sienna will spend the rest of her life paying for what she did, that her crime is documented and punished and remembered. The truth came out, slowly and painfully, but it came out. And sometimes, in this world, that's the best you can hope for. Mom's death wasn't natural. It was murder. And the person responsible is behind bars where she belongs. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.